If your husband ever served in the military, there may be a monthly payment available to you that has nothing to do with Social Security at all, and almost nothing to do with what we've covered in our other videos. It comes from the Department of Veterans Affairs, and it's called Dependency and Indemnity Compensation. Most people just call it DIC. Many widows of veterans have never heard of this benefit, or assume it only applies if their husband passed away directly because of his military service. That assumption alone has kept thousands of widows from ever applying for something they may very well be owed. So today, I want to walk you through what this benefit actually is, who qualifies, and how it works, alongside anything you may already be receiving from Social Security. Stay with me, because this is one of the most overlooked benefits I've come across in this space. If you're new here, welcome. This channel walks through the financial pieces of losing a spouse that so often go unexplained, not to replace grief with paperwork, but because so many widows are owed more than they realize, simply because nobody laid it out clearly for them. Today's topic is specifically for widows whose husbands served in the military, whether that service was decades ago or more recent. If that's you, please stay with me, even if you assume this doesn't apply to your situation. The eligibility rules here are broader than most people expect, and I'd rather you hear the full picture than assume you don't qualify. Let's start with the basics. Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, or DIC, is a monthly, tax-free benefit paid by the Department of Veterans Affairs to eligible survivors of a veteran when the veteran's death is connected to their military service, or in some cases, when the veteran was receiving certain VA disability compensation before passing, even if the death itself wasn't directly caused by a service-related condition. This is completely separate from Social Security survivor benefits. It comes from a different agency entirely, follows different rules, and in most cases can be received in addition to Social Security survivor benefits, rather than instead of them. I want to underline that last point because it surprises so many widows. Receiving DIC generally does not reduce your Social Security survivor benefit, and receiving Social Security generally does not reduce your DIC payment. These are two separate systems, and many widows are eligible for both at the same time without realizing it. I also want to mention that DIC isn't limited only to widows of veterans who served in combat. Service-connected conditions can develop from all kinds of circumstances during military service. Training injuries, exposure to certain environmental hazards, illnesses that developed or worsened during service, and many other situations that have nothing to do with direct combat. If your husband served at any point and had any documented service-connected condition, it's worth looking into this, regardless of the specific nature of his service. So who actually qualifies? Let's walk through the main paths to eligibility, because there's more than one. The first path is when a veteran's death was caused by or connected to a service-related injury or illness. This is the pathway most people have heard of, and it includes conditions that were officially connected to his military service through VA disability ratings. The second path, and the one so many widows don't realize exists, applies when a veteran was rated by the VA as totally disabled due to a service-connected condition for a certain number of years before passing, even if the actual cause of death wasn't directly related to that condition. In these cases, survivors may still qualify for DIC, simply based on how long the veteran held that disability rating before passing. A third consideration involves veterans who passed away while still on active duty, which has its own specific eligibility pathway as well. I want to be honest with you. The specific rules and time requirements here can be genuinely detailed, and they've been updated and clarified over the years. This is exactly the kind of situation where I'd encourage you not to assume you don't qualify simply because your husband's death certificate doesn't list a service-related cause. The disability rating pathway catches many widows by surprise, in a good way, once they actually look into it. Now let's talk about what this benefit actually looks like in practice. DIC provides a monthly payment, and the amount can be affected by a few factors: how long you were married, whether you have dependent children, and in some cases, additional allowances for specific circumstances. I'm intentionally not going to give you a specific dollar figure in this video because these amounts are periodically adjusted, and I'd rather send you to a reliable, current source than risk giving you an outdated number. The VA's own website or a call to their benefits line will give you the most accurate, current figure for your specific situation. What I do want you to know is that this is a genuinely meaningful monthly payment for many families, not a small symbolic amount like some other benefits we've discussed. For widows who qualify and aren't currently receiving it, this can represent a significant piece of monthly income they didn't know they were entitled to. I also want to mention that there can be additional monthly allowances on top of the base payment in certain circumstances. For example, if you have dependent children still under 18, or if you require the aid and attendance of another person due to your own health needs. These additional allowances aren't automatically included. They're generally added on request, once documented. This is another reason why speaking with someone knowledgeable about the full application, rather than just the base benefit, matters so much. Here's how the application process generally works. You'll typically apply directly through the Department of Veterans Affairs, either online through their website, by mail using a specific application form, or with the help of an accredited Veterans Service Officer, someone specifically trained to help survivors navigate VA claims, often at no cost to you. I want to specifically mention Veterans Service Officers because so many widows don't realize this resource exists or assume it costs money. Many veterans organizations, county veterans service offices, and national organizations offer free assistance from accredited representatives who help you gather documentation, complete the application correctly, and follow up on your claim's status. Given how detailed some of these eligibility rules can be, I genuinely think reaching out to one of these officers is one of the most valuable steps you can take. You'll generally need documentation, including your husband's discharge papers, his death certificate, your marriage certificate, and any VA disability rating documentation connected to his service. If you don't have copies of his discharge papers, the National Archives can often help you request them. I also want to mention DIC claims can take time to process, sometimes several months, so starting the application as early as possible is generally in your best interest, even if you're not certain you'll qualify. Applying and being found ineligible costs you nothing but time. Not applying at all, when you may have qualified, costs you the benefit itself. I also want to gently note that if your initial claim is denied, that isn't necessarily the end of the road. VA claims, including DIC, have a formal appeals process, and many widows find that with additional documentation, or with the help of a Veterans Service Officer reviewing the specific reason for denial, a claim that was initially turned down is later approved. Please don't let an initial no discourage you from asking more questions about why and what additional information might change the outcome. Let's talk about how DIC fits alongside everything else we've discussed in this series. As I mentioned earlier, DIC generally does not reduce your Social Security survivor benefits, and Social Security generally does not reduce your DIC payment. This means many widows of veterans are eligible to receive both at the same time, in full, without one affecting the other. There is one related consideration worth knowing about. If your husband was a federal employee receiving certain other survivor annuities, there can sometimes be an offset between those specific programs and DIC. This is a more specialized situation, and if it applies to you, a Veterans Service Officer or a VA representative can walk through the specific details with you directly. For most widows, though, the general takeaway is simple and genuinely good news. DIC and Social Security survivor benefits are separate systems, and being eligible for one doesn't typically prevent you from also receiving the other. Let's go through the mistakes I see most often. Mistake 1. Assuming DIC only applies if the cause of death was directly and obviously related to military service, and not looking into the disability rating pathway. Mistake 2. Not knowing that free help is available through accredited Veterans Service Officers and either not applying at all or attempting a complicated application entirely alone. Mistake 3, assuming that receiving Social Security survivor benefits disqualifies them from also receiving DIC and never applying as a result. Mistake 4, waiting to gather every piece of documentation perfectly before starting the application, rather than beginning the process and gathering supporting documents along the way. Mistake 5, not requesting help retrieving discharge papers or service records when the widow doesn't have copies readily available. Mistake 6, not asking about additional allowances, such as aid and attendance or dependent child allowances, and only ever receiving the base benefit amount. Mistake 7, giving up after an initial denial without realizing that many DIC claims are successfully approved on appeal once additional documentation or clarification is provided. Let me share a story that reflects what many widows of veterans experience. I'll call her Barbara, though her story mirrors so many others. Barbara's husband served decades earlier and had been receiving a VA disability rating for a service-connected condition for many years, before he eventually passed away from an unrelated illness. Barbara assumed, understandably, that because his death wasn't directly caused by that condition, she wouldn't qualify for anything from the VA. She had even mentioned to her children that she didn't think there was anything left for them to look into regarding his service. A friend at a veterans support group mentioned DIC to her almost in passing and encouraged her to speak with a veterans service officer at her county office, free of charge. Barbara was hesitant at first, assuming it would be a complicated process for something she doubted she'd qualify for. But the officer walked her through the disability rating pathway, step by step, gathered the necessary documentation alongside her, and submitted the claim on her behalf. Barbara learned that because her husband had held that disability rating for the required number of years, she did in fact qualify for DIC, even though his death certificate listed an unrelated cause. The application took several months to process, but once approved, Barbara received not only the ongoing monthly benefit, but also a retroactive payment covering the month since she first applied. She later told me that if her friend hadn't mentioned it, she never would have thought to ask. She simply didn't know the disability rating pathway existed. Here's your simple checklist for this week. Step 1. Gather any documentation you have of your husband's military service, including discharge papers and any VA disability rating letters. Step 2. Contact your county Veterans Service Office or search for an accredited Veterans Service Officer near you and ask specifically about DIC eligibility. Step 3. If you don't have discharge papers, contact the National Archives to request copies. Step 4. Begin the application process, even if you're uncertain about eligibility. The cost of applying and not qualifying is far smaller than the cost of never applying at all. Step 5. Ask specifically whether Social Security survivor benefits you're already receiving would be affected, and go into that conversation knowing that, for most widows, the answer is no. I know that revisiting your husband's military service, especially the parts connected to illness or disability, can bring up difficult memories. Please be gentle with yourself as you look into this. This isn't about reliving hardship. It's about making sure that his service and the sacrifices connected to it continue to support you in the way they were meant to. You don't have to navigate this alone, and you don't have to figure out every VA rule yourself. Free help exists specifically for widows like you, and reaching out for it is not a burden to anyone. It's exactly what that help is there for. Whatever you discover through this process, whether it's a monthly benefit you didn't expect or simply peace of mind knowing you checked, either outcome is worth the small effort it takes to ask. If this video brought some clarity today, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe. Every week, we walk through another piece of this journey together. And if you know another widow of a veteran who may not know about this benefit, please consider sharing this with her. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take gentle care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.